I am clear, and the Cabinet agreed this morning, that the decision must be accepted and the process of implementing the decision in the best possible way must now begin. Britain is leaving the European Union, but we must not turn our back on Europe or on the rest of the world.
British Prime Minister David Cameron in the House of Commons today after making it clear that he would step away from his post probably around October. Meantime, despite his disagreement over the decision of the voters to say it's time for Great Britain to leave the European Union, you heard the Prime Minister there say the results must be respected. So, our British cousins made their decision to leave the EU. What does it mean for the U.S. in our upcoming election? And remember, you can join us in this conversation. Call me at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. For more, let's add to our panel by welcoming in Opportunity Live senior contributor Tom Rogan. Tom is joining us via Skype, and we're rejoined by John Zogby, screen right, and in the center of things, presidential historian and Reagan biographer Craig Shirley. Let me go first to you, Tom, as we hear about a petition, 3.7 million signatures, basically calling for a revote on the UK's national referendum. Is that even conceivable at this point, Tom?
Good to be with you, JD. No, it isn't. But, Heat Street actually today has run a report suggesting that actually that petition may be falsified in large part. But it does reflect both, and I can attest to this anecdotally through my British friends on Facebook and through the people I've been talking to in the British media, the left and also elements of the conservative pro-European side in Britain are very upset about the outcome and are determined, however possible, to overcome it. I had a piece out at National Review actually this afternoon talking about the fact that if you see, it's not just about this petition, it's also about efforts by members of Parliament to try and say that, look, it doesn't mean anything, the referendum, we have to approve it, and we're not going to. And it's also elements of the British, if you will, establishment saying that ultimately the will of the people in this regard can be discarded because the costs were not foreseen and that the Leave campaign hasn't articulated those costs. But David Cameron, I think, said it well this morning through his spokesperson, which is that there's no way that there's going to be a redo. The judgment has been made by the popular will of the people. What is done is done. But I do think there is going to be complexity and battles ahead. But what is done is done.
Well, let's hear from our callers across America at 1-877-NEWSMAX. Let's go to the sunflower state of Kansas. That's where Delmar is standing by. Delmar, welcome to Newsmax Prime.
Thank you, and I agree that the people that have their say in Great Britain, and they're free from all the other countries they have to deal with, and they're our strong ally. They'll always be a good country for us, and we'll always be a good nation for them. And the same thing needs to happen in the United States. We need to clean house with the dirty congressmen on both sides of the board and start all over. Well, get a fresh start. All
right, Delmar, we appreciate you checking in from Kansas. Let's check now with Craig Shirley, who has seen more than his share of American elections. You hear Delmar there. Craig, we've heard a lot of talk that this could basically mirror what our British cousins did last week. We could see here in November in the person of Donald Trump. How likely do you think that is, Craig?
I think it's very possible, but it depends on Donald Trump being able to harness what is sweeping the West. You know, this populist uprising just wasn't expressed in Great Britain the other day. It's also showing up in France, Italy, and of course in Canada, and right here in the United States with the very nomination of Donald Trump. He seems to have missed the boat, though, in the initial phase of channeling the vote into saying that this vindicates his candidacy and puts the entire establishment and the elites on trial, including Hillary Clinton. Here in the United States. He's been a little bit tone deaf as far as taking full political advantage of it. But certainly the vote does accrue to the side of populist, anti-elitism, and anti-establishment.
All right, let's go back to the phones. Our second caller tonight from Kansas. This time it's a lady. Mary Ann joins us now on Newsmax Prime. Hi, Mary Ann.
Hello there.
Your take on the upcoming election here in the United States.
Well, I just hope that Trump wins. If he doesn't, I think we're in a lot of trouble. I think we'll have a revolution of this country. I live in the center of the country, and I know how people feel out here. They want change. They do not want Hillary. And we had a great General Eisenhower president from here, and we've had a lot of great other leaders from Kansas, Bob Dole, and we still have some good leaders. But if we don't keep good leaders in there, this country is done for. And I feel terrible about that.
Well, Marianne, we feel very great about getting your call tonight, and I especially, of those leaders you mentioned from Kansas, I especially liked Ike, and I thank you so much for that. Let me go to John Zogby. John Zogby, in the wake of the Brexit vote last week, you were issuing a statement and a sentiment that this was bad news for Hillary Clinton. Do you stand by that?
I do. Absolutely. She's two polls or one poll notwithstanding, she's stuck in place. She has her personality problems, but notwithstanding all of those, fact of the matter is she represents an elite. In fact, she is the elite, she and her husband, and the Brexit vote was monumental. I mean, it's as big as the Berlin Wall coming down. The potential not only for Europe and for the United States for this anti-elitism to be represented in the polls. I do disagree with Craig. I thought that Donald Trump was measured. In fact, to some degree, even ignored it. I think it's a kind of issue that you just let speak for itself, especially when you're on foreign soil.
All right, let's go back to the telephones, not a foreign medium for us. Down to Hot Springs, Arkansas for Robert. Robert, welcome to Newsmax Prime.
Thank you, JD. I just want to put my 2 cents forth in for Donald Trump because I believe he's the only candidate who's qualified and has experience as a businessman to carry out and enforce our Constitution.
Got that, and I appreciate that. I don't want to give it short shrift, Robert, but I want to ask you about the Brexit vote. What do you think about the British people standing up and saying it's time to leave the European Union?
Well, it was a surprise to me, but I believe it's time for a change like that because seeing how the rest of Europe seems to be more terrorism pro, and the British are more aligned with, and they're thinking with Americans, and I want to keep their support with us.
You know, Robert, it's interesting what you mentioned. I want to go to Tom on this one because Robert mentioned something, quite frankly, I saw in the British papers in the pre-referendum polling that had the Remain people ahead, albeit narrowly. Tom, what was your take on the vote prior to it? Did you think that the UK would remain in the EU? Were you surprised in stark contrast to some of the pre-referendum polling?
Well, JD and Robert, I have to confess that a month ago I thought that it was very likely that the Remain campaign would win. But then 2 weeks ago, and I have to give credit to my McLaughlin Group panelist, Pat Buchanan, for leading me to the light in a way. You know, Pat noted the fact that the polls had shifted. And I went and looked and I talked to people in London, and they noted the fact that the polls had indeed shifted. And that was coming from both liberals and conservatives that I talked to. And I think the reason it shifted is that basic issue of sovereignty. That basic issue that Robert picks up of individual freedom that unifies, I think, Britain and the United States. Look, as an American who grew up in the UK, and there's a specific reason I'm sitting here with this stuff here, which is my American grandfather, who is a Pacific Marine on Okinawa, fighting for the cause of individual freedom. I think ultimately the British people, in that same way that motivates Americans, pride in our country and patriotism and dedication to our values of individual freedom, whether that be the Second Amendment or free speech, I think the British people came to the same conclusion, that a country that has done so much in history, back so long, 1,000 years ago, to the present day, to the Blitz with the Germans, actually came to the conclusion that they were worth more than subscribing to the notion that bureaucrats in Brussels should define their future. And I think that's what it came down to, quite a sort of deep, in some ways intangible, emotional feeling based on their own philosophy of what Britain stands for. And I think that's what pulled it out. And that certainly, in my point of view, in the last 2 weeks, made me think, actually, it's probably going to be a leave.
Craig, Shirley, final 30 seconds to you. A couple of other forces at work in this. Number one, the EU's open borders. And number two, President Obama going over to lecture the Brits. Did that contribute to the Leave forces winning? 20 seconds.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. Obama shot off his mouth. He should have stayed silent. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I would just go back to what John said too. I would say that Trump did not grab the issue and ride it and flog it the way he should have. He was talking about his golf course, for heaven's sake, when he could have been talking about the populist forces at work now in America.
Yeah, bottom line is you got to talk about the job you want. Everybody saw that great golf course. Gentlemen, we thank all three of you for talking to us tonight. When we come back, Diamond and Silk. So stay with us.